Okay, this video right here is based around compositional builds using the Autumn Brook, the Autumn Bank left, and Autumn Bank right stamp. Okay, these stamps can be used, for their intended purpose of creating autumn types of scenery. They can be also just used in greens, or you can do, believe it or not, even a winter scene. Maybe the deciduous trees wouldn't have so much of a, leaves on them like that, but you can do kind of a midnight blue type of color scheme on this. So you can use these in any ways that you want to. In this video, I'm not really going to go into the finishing of these scenes or any one of them. I don't know, maybe I should finish one of, like this one right here. But I just wanted to go into the compositional builds, not just in terms of how to merge these three stamps in potentially with one another. They can be used individually as well, but how they're used in conjunction with one another here. But also, for me, I think one of the really fun things about these stamps is how to address the foregrounds. I think we can create really rich foreground imagery. These two right here are just very simple with just some kind of a deciduous evergreen foreground in the form of the tree cluster images. Okay, this one right here is just the rocks and leaves stamp. But what I really like to do are things like this in the foreground, where I've layered some grass, some rocks, some bushes, and some trees in here, because all of this right here is kind of going on in the foreground. Let me show you the foreground on this stamp right here. Kind of, if you look really closely here, we have a kind of an oscillation of these little bushes down here, and there's some rocks down here, and there's trees kind of sprouting up from there. And as you know, if you've seen any of the videos, I like to kind of mimic what's going on in the background. Often it's really simple. If I see some grass in the background, I'll put some reeds in the foreground. And if I see some, evergreen trees in the background, I'll put a large pine tree in the foreground or something like that. But on these ones where we have a lot of that kind of texturing going on within these stamps right here, I can do that same type of thing down here. So I've used 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of images just in the foreground, and that can kind of create this really rich foreground in here leading into the scene like that, so that instead of just this foreground kind of being an afterthought potentially, you can really work in a lot of different colors in here to mimic what's going on in your backgrounds. Okay, same thing right here. Here's just some rocks down here, and I've kind of placed some of these trees within, behind, and in back of this rock right here. Okay, so again, we've kind of reiterated what's going on in the background right here in the foreground, and I think it's a nice visual lead-in into the scene like that, and it gives the scene, or the scenes, that kind of extended depth of field by having something in the foreground leading into the scene, that can extend quite a ways into the background like that. So anyway, hope this scene or this video comes in handy for those that have these stamps, and gives you some additional ideas on what you can do with them in terms of your foreground to kind of lead to kind of maybe a more full looking composition, and how much fun you can have just in those foreground elements. Okay, so anyways, hope you enjoy the video. If you have any questions, just drop us a note. Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Stampscaping 101. This video is going to be a image video based on kind of compositional builds, okay? And that's going to be with the Autumn Banks right and left, and the Autumn Brook stamp. Okay, these images are characterized by kind of the the oscillation of both deciduous and evergreen trees. And they're a lot of fun to use in terms of the different types of colors you can use on them, okay? With these autumn trees in here, you can do it any type of color you want. You can make them any type of deciduous tree you want. You can make them aspens if you want to, or they can be more of the, you know, red, goldish types of trees. And you can do all types of things in the water too, because you can kind of create those types of color reflections in the water's surface, okay? So, that being said, let's show you how these are used, okay? Now, all of these designs can be used independent from one another, but they can also be used together, okay? Now, in a scene like this, okay, if we're talking about a quarter-page card size, like a 4¼ by 5½, this stamp, these large stamps, pretty much can fill up that entire space, okay? There's a lot of surface area to these stamps too, so what you do is you get plenty of pressure, left, center, right, top, and bottom, okay? Don't rock your stamps, but just give a good flat, even pressure all the way around, okay? All right, now that is the Autumn Brook stamp, all right? Now, that's just used by itself, and I'll show you what you can do with that as well. I'll talk about some filler stamps as we work around these types of images. Okay, now let's say I want to use this kind of more on the side right here. Okay, and again, this is the Autumn Brook. It has that little kind of waterway going off into the distance. Okay. Now, if we want to add on to that, what we can do is I take the Autumn Bank left here, okay? I don't know if you can see. You can see how that kind of merges in with the other one, and this also can go off to the side. This is the left side. And it's kind of a natural pairing for this Autumn Brook, more so than the Autumn Bank right, but I'll show you what I use that Autumn Bank right for. Okay, so I take this and I'll overlap my first impression. Again, this is the Autumn Bank left. Okay. And that'll merge right in there with that one, okay? Now this, I would put some additional trees in the background here, but I'll do that later, okay? Now let me do another impression with the Autumn Brook, okay? And I'll show you how this, if this is used more so on the, to the left of the card. I'll show you how that Autumn Bank left will merge that way. Okay. All right, and I'll merge it this way, okay? Overlapping probably about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 inch or so. There's plenty of tolerance in there. I wouldn't overlap it like 2 inches or something like that, but you don't have to do a lot of careful positioning, okay? But you do want to overlap it, though. They've been designed to be overlapped for the ease of, you know, compositional builds, okay? So here you go, something like this. Now, I'll show you how it just, I mean, these aren't meant to be used like this, like building a bunch of them, but let's see if I can overlap this one. See like here, that's about, see, I'm just showing you how these things would come together. If you had like this really long, you know, panoramic one, you can have it kind of going in and out and in and out. You're just kind of matching up the shorelines a little bit. See like that? You can kind of blend in with one another. Just like that. Okay, now that was those two used together. The Autumn Brook and Autumn Bank left. Now let me show you the Autumn Bank left and right used together. I should explain that. Now see, the reason why these two go really well together is because this side right here has this foreground, okay, coming out much closer to you right here. And this one has the foreground on the left side, okay? Now these two right here have the foreground on the right side, so if you kind of go like that, it looks kind of awkward, like that. I mean, you could, I guess, you know, you can just make that a, you know, this kind of this outcropping of grass or something like that, but I don't think that goes as well together as this right here. See these areas down at the base here? They're kind of at the same distances from one another. And then kind of this right back in here, you can have this kind of going behind there, and what you're saying is that there's like a, you know, little inlet or something of waterway back in there by doing something like that. And it kind of matches with this background out here, you know, this background within the design. Okay, so that being said, we have, I think my black pad needs a little bit of ink. Okay. All right, now this, again, from left to right, if you're doing a quarter page scene, and if you want that stamp to, you know, cover that entire area, you can just stamp that down and it covers pretty much from left to right. I don't know about entirely, but mostly. Okay, but let's say I'm stamping this on a landscape format, you know, the width is longer than the height. Or if you're just working on, let's say, a half-page scene or something much larger, then you'll need to continue the bank. Okay, now that's where this one comes in like this. All right. So what you do is you just kind of match them up the best you can. I mean, you can use a positioner or something of that sort. I just kind of eyeball it, and I go for the banks, and I overlap about a 1/4 inch or so into it. Okay, I stamped it a little bit low, but not too bad. I kind of can't look over it because my camera's right in my head, but yeah, I should have stamped it a little bit higher, but it's close enough. Okay, now let me show you. Let me do this on a kind of a larger scene so you can see that, how they can kind of merge together. Okay, now this one's a half page. Something like this would be kind of interesting, more of a like a panoramic, like a letterbox movie set size. Okay. This is one of the few kind of themes that I've done before in a full page scene, you know, full 8.5 by 11 letter size. Now this one's a half page again, but I don't know, I've done like whole large banks where it continues on, where I've used, I think, multiple impressions of the same image. Okay. All right, let me get this one matched up a little bit better this time. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I didn't get that right in the middle there. Let me show you what you do here. You can take that. I'm telling you, this camera right in my face gets in the way of once in a while. Okay, let me show you what you do here. Because these videos, that's what these videos are good for. You can show you what to do in the event of. Okay, now I'm just taking that little bit again and stamping it in here, like so. And you get an extra tree. And then that really fills in right there. And hopefully it's seamless enough, okay? I mean, I can take any type of tree too and just plop it right in there and it will merge, or it should merge. Okay, now what we have is this, okay? Now see where I have that other little bit right here that didn't fill in? What you can do is we can take this side of this stamp and just put it right over here, okay? Or you can use, you know, the Autumn Brook, you know, side 2. That would work just fine too, like over here. Okay. So that fills in right there. But again, let me show you how, if you were doing something much longer in scope, you know, how these images can kind of, you know, now this has a tree right here. I'd put an additional tree in here, but you know, for the most part, they, you know, they look like they can merge in pretty well together, right? You know, this one could be like right here or so. And you're going to fill in with some additional color too, but here's this one right here. So you can just kind of keep going on and on. See that right there? Okay. Side-to-side applications. Now I'll show you what I like to do too. We have the space in these cards filled up from left to right. Now on this one right here, I think this would just be largely water down here. But if you wanted to, kind of putting yourself on the other side of this little inlet or creek or lake or whatever, you know, you can kind of stamp in some similar types of trees on the other side of the water. And this is the tree cluster, and the tree cluster, either large or small, depending on what type of field of view you want. Also has that little deciduous tree in the middle of these two. And I did that purposely, you know, so you can separate the two and you can see the silhouette of the first one better than having 3 evergreens right in here. Then that whole thing would just be one big dark blob in there. So that's why I kind of intersperse the deciduous tree in the middle there, you know, so you can see the silhouettes a little bit better. So that's the type of kind of design considerations that I'm thinking about when I'm doing these designs. You want to have kind of a clarity within your compositions of the different forms, okay? Now, one of the things that, one of my favorite trips that I ever took was to Maine. If there's any, I don't know, what do you call the Maine people? People from Maine. If you're out there, hello. If you've ever been to any of my workshops out there, thank you for coming and taking those classes and whatnot. But I took a trip out there and I taught classes on like one weekend. And then there was this, they had their own kind of convention out there. And I think it was called the Jubilee. I've asked someone about that recently and seen if I'm not remembering it incorrectly. And I think they said that was correct. Okay, now by the way, this is Boulders with Lichen. But what I did was I planned for and I hardly ever did this. I think that might have been the first time I did that. But okay, I'm adding some rocks over here. But in between the workshops and that convention, I had that 5 days in between, or I don't know, 4 days, or however much time I took off. But I hiked around Acadia National Park, which is, I think it's the smallest national park in terms of acreage or something. But loved it. It was crazy. I got it in what they call full color, when all the trees in the park were turning, and we're at the peak of their, I don't know, show, I guess, or whatever. And most of the trails that I was hiking on were, I don't know, they weren't long. They were all kind of in the, I think, under 2 miles or something like that, with hardly any elevation change, when it comes down here. Here's the tree cluster large right here. And see, I just kind of masked off some of those trees in the foreground, and I put them right behind. But what I liked was, it was so cool. It wasn't just the trees. Everyone thinks of the trees, of course, which are the most spectacular, but I liked all it was all the color in the bushes, too, the low-lying things, there were some really bright red colors in the little leaves. I mean, you saw, like colors like this, interspersed with some, remaining greens and whatnot. It was truly spectacular. And I hiked that park for, I don't know, 3 or 4 days when I was out there. I felt like I had the entire place to myself, We're talking about that peak color and a national park, and to have all these trails. And I think I saw one person out there one time on one of the trails. Maybe 2. Maybe there were a couple people hiking together. But they were doing a lot of trail maintenance too, so I saw some rangers and probably some volunteers fixing some trails on one trail that was hiking along this kind of cliffside next to this lake. But yeah, as soon as you kind of hike in about a mile off certain trails, even if there was a lot of people in the parking lot, but just no one hiking. Okay, but anyways, see, I'm adding these trees in here, and what I was getting at was a lot of those low-lying bushes. And let me do it on this other one. But here's the other side of the lake here. Okay. Let me do it on this one right here. I'll add some bush. Okay, now see how these rocks are down here? One of the things I like to do too, to mimic kind of what this idea is over here in the Autumn banks left and right in the Autumn Brook. See that grass down here? And then we have these trees growing out of it. I can kind of reiterate that same kind of idea over here, and I'll put in some grass. And this one happens to be the grass texture stamp. Okay. It looks strange kind of on its own, but what we'll do is we'll nestle some rocks in it. You can use just about any rocks. So what you do is you stamp out your grass first, and then what you do is you take it and you mask it off, okay? Don't mask it all off completely like this. Have a little bit of it showing so that this rock kind of nestles into it, okay? And what we'll do is we'll go about like that. Okay. So now the rock is sitting kind of in the grass right here, right? Because we undermasked it, okay? That's the whole idea of the series. You're kind of, you're overlapping things, you're undermasking things, So you don't have to do careful placement, like super edge to edge, and you saw what I did here. You know, I kind of, I didn't overlap it. I was concerned about matching it up for this video, but then, you know, if you miss, then you just fill it in with, you know, another tree or something like that. It's not really any big deal. And I didn't have to do, you know, super careful positioning on that tree. You just kind of fill it in with some of that. And, okay, now we've done that. And where's my other... I thought I had my other tree over here. Be right back. Okay, I'm back. These are the maple pear, okay? But if you want to use it just as a little brushy, you know, to bush, you can use a tree in place of a bush, or to represent a bush. So I'm kind of putting these little bushes down here, and it kind of looks like, you know, kind of a closer up view right here of what's going on. Let me grab the this stamp right here. See what's going on in this little foreground down here. We have a little bit of rock and these bushes down here. See, I put that dark little figure in the back of this bush right here, so this little bush stands out. So I intersperse kind of dark and light in there, so you can see, look, little different forms. And here's some trees here. And, okay, you know, just to show you kind of the extremities of which you can layer things, okay? Here's the tree cluster again. Okay, so what I've done is I stamped out my grass texture, then I masked that off. I stamped out my boulders with lichen, masked it off, stamped out the maple pear, masked it off. And you can see the masking. I'm just using the same rip paper towel for all these masks. And why not put some of these trees, the tree cluster? I don't need to use the whole thing. I don't want the trunks on here. I just kind of want the, you know, the tree portion of it. And maybe these are, I don't know, small trees. They could be young trees here in the foreground. Who knows? Okay. And like I said, undermask it a little bit. See that? So you have all this type of rich foreground to go against that kind of composition in the back. So instead of having this, okay, just bare in the foreground, I didn't leave a lot of room for foreground in this one because I stamped this so low, but you can add some reeds or something like that, or just a tree to kind of frame that off a little bit. Let's see. Let's do that. Now, I mean, this is just the compositional builds here. I'm just stamping this all out in black. One of the things that's really special about any type of like autumn style imagery, right? It's the color. So instead of just stamping this all in black, I mean, you could stamp this all in black. You can go in here and color some of these different things. But what I like to do is I like to, when I am doing like a fall type of representation of this image right here, I would color this in, then I would take in some pens and I would color some of these trees. I would bring in the browns, the reds, and oranges inherently in the color itself that I'm coloring the design with. I would mix some, you know, some colors on the stamp so that it would stamp out with those colors. Then I would go in and add some more colors to that, okay? But this video right here, I just want to show you people how to use these compositionally and how to blend them in with one another. So see, that gives it kind of a, there's a kind of a grandeur to this too. Now you put this foreground in here and it, you know, it's like you're looking down at that lake, I think. It'd be the perfect spot for a little kayaker or something like that in this little, you know, this little opening. But anyway, okay, let's see what we have here. some different scenes here. And if you're curious about, some different applications on as far as what these scenes could look like, and some different options, just look at the Stampscapes.com and look at the stamp modules, and then the codes for all these ones are, 212 through 214, and you can see how people have used these different images on their scenes, what colors they've used, I don't know, what compositions they've done with it before. And I think I have one or two videos using these where I've kind of gone over the compositional builds too, but this video was just dedicated solely to the how to merge these all together. But what I've always enjoyed about these is that you can merge these all together, and they go together in a nice seamless fashion. You just kind of match up the the shorelines right there, and see how that kind of keep going on. And then when you start bringing in color into it, it will merge everything together in an even more seamless fashion with the use of kind of universal tones, okay, when you start bringing in all these colors into it like so. Okay, now there's other things you can do. I mean, this is just, we did the kind of the backgrounds and foregrounds, but you can stamp like rolling hills in the background. We have the soft hill stamp that can be used back there. And, do that in, the deciduous color schemes if you want to. Sometimes I like to just have this, this bank here against just kind of a more open sky. Sometimes if I put too much color in the background, unless you kind of separate it with a little bit of like a fog or a mist type of effect, sometimes it gets a little bit busy by doing that. But I have done that before in those larger scenes. Okay, now this one's just rocks and leaves. And this one would be a good one too. I was talking about all those little low line types of foliage, kind of in these settings that were also changing colors, the real brilliant reds, deep, I don't know, like crimson reds almost. But on something like this, you can, ink it up. I like to go with some darker inks, and I like to go in here and start coloring like reds and greens together. It is mixing and kind of overlapping, but it looks good when you stamp them out, and you have that brilliant color down there in the foreground, kind of reiterating what you have going on in the background. And if you're doing that on this foreground right here, don't be afraid to color some of these grasses in here underneath these trees, some of those colors as well, like mimicking what's going on over here. So if you have kind of fall foliage colors kind of going on back here, don't be afraid to bring it in here, because something's grass doesn't always have to mean that grass is green. Unless you want, you're doing it for a reason, okay? You can do it to kind of contrast against some other colors in the background, if it's too much of one thing or something like that. My favorite thing is to kind of do kind of the beginning of fall sometimes, so we have a little bit of greens, browns, and where the greens are turning, whatever colors they are. So this is called Boulders with Lichen down here. You can color rocks. You can put some lichen colorations on there in the kind of ochre, orange, red, I don't know. A lichen has all kinds of different colors to it. But so anyways, it really gives you a lot of different options here, and like I said, the spring color scheme is really fun too, just doing everything kind of in kind of a young green leaves and whatnot, deep green leaves on your trees. And I don't know, the possibilities are wide open with it. It's probably not so much of a winter scene, but you can do it. I've done this in all blues before. I don't know if it's so much winter as it is like a midnight in the Autumn Grove composition. But I really like doing things like highlighting some of these trees in here. That's one of the funnest things for me to do. There's a lot of kind of an oscillation of darks and lights within the forms, and that's where I really love to add things like little highlights with things like gel pens, or in this case, you know, if you're doing all kinds of colors in there, it really opens up the possibilities for colored highlights, because if you have all those colors, you know, churning, you know, the turning colors in the trees, it opens it up for different types of highlight colors. So anyways, hope that comes in handy for anyone that has these stamps, or, you know, if you haven't used them yet or whatnot. I should come up, I want to do a set with these ones too at some point in time, because I really love them used in conjunction with one another, as well as by themselves in smaller compositions. So thanks for watching, hope it comes in handy. Thanks for tuning into the channel. If you have any questions, drop us a note in the comments section.